Hello, Apramada readers. I'm really delighted today to have Silavadin with me. Hello, Silavadin.
Hello. Hello. Very nice to be here.
Yeah, it's very nice to see you, actually. Silavadin is a member of the Triratna Buddhist order. He's a practicing Buddhist for about 30 years now. And he's also a philosopher, which is unusual to have a practicing Buddhist order member who's also a philosopher. And I think you do certain things within the movement with philosophy, don't you? I remember going to a class of yours where you were teaching us how to speak to each other with different, when you disagreed with each other about a point, how to do that. And you introduced me to something which was really, really valuable, and I've been using it ever since, or trying to. I don't always, I have to admit. The idea is charitas, charity, where when somebody gives you an argument opposing to your own, you don't go for the weakest possible argument, you go for the strongest one. And if your opponent doesn't put their argument across very well, not at its strongest, you help them to make it stronger, and then you argue against that. That was a really, really valuable session for me.
Yeah.
Yes, and yes, you do things within the order, don't you? Every year, I think you have a symposium at Adhisthana looking at various philosophical issues, yes?
Yeah, with Divan and Matt Drake.
That's right, that's right. Yeah. And you've just done one, although you couldn't go because of the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. There was 2 weeks ago, there was the last one about evolution, actually. Yeah.
Ah, okay. So evolution, and that's actually what I'm going to interview about today, evolution. So let's just plunge in. Of course, we all have heard of evolution, where everyone is very familiar with the idea of Charles Darwin and random selection and survival of the fittest and so on. But to make sure we have understood that, can you just give us an outline of Darwin's ideas for us?
Well, Darwin's ideas, it was actually one of the proponents of this. Daniel Dennett is one of the most famous defenders of this view. He says a Darwinian view is like randomness. It's the principle of randomness made big. So it's the one pillar is random change. Everything is just random. And the other pillar is, so to speak, survival of the fittest. So if you have random change, things are just floating around randomly without any meaning or purpose. And then you have lots of stuff floating around, so to speak, animals or atoms, and then you have this principle of survival of the fittest, and then building on these stones, you get the whole universe, so to speak.
Yes, so the only purpose of evolution in that sense then is to survive.
Yeah, to survive,
There's no higher purpose in
there's no
Daniel
higher
Dennett's understanding, Now, I've heard of Daniel Dennett. I've never read any of his stuff, but he's well known as a materialist, isn't he? A hard materialist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he is,
Yes. So, where do you stand with that? What are your views on that?
Well, I always, even before I was a Buddhist, I always found it difficult. Starting with my grandmother, who was Catholic, and he said, if they want to come from apes, well, I'm not from an ape. I come from God, and you come from God. That's obviously a bit of a naive view. But starting from that, I always found it a bit difficult to. The Darwinian view that is all just matter and it's no purpose, and it's going from bottom up, so to speak. I always found it a bit difficult, and then, but then later during my studies, I did a course on evolution theory, Darwinian evolution theory, and I also saw how strong this theory is, how strong the explanatory force of it. It's a very good theory. So I was also very impressed about how much it can explain. So then I was a bit in doubt. Maybe it's true after all. And then I found this book by Thomas Nagel. I have it here. Mind and Cosmos.
Yes, I've seen that. I've seen that in Waterstones.
Yeah. It's a very good book. And so the undertitle is Why the Materialist Neo-Darwinian Conception of Nature is Almost Certainly False. So I read this book, and I was very impressed by his argument, and so that gave me tools to critique this Darwinian view, actually. So I was very happy with that.
That's very interesting, because you say you began not. I think you said you didn't like the Darwinian view, and not liking something is not a good enough reason to disagree with it, is it?
Yeah, it is.
So one could say that you didn't like it, and then you found someone else who gave you the reason not to like it.
It's a bit like that. I think it's generally like this with all philosophers. They come from a certain point of view, but it's more a question of temperament, of intuition, and then later they find good reasons for it. Yes. Also the materialist. Of course. The famous, what they called militant atheists, they seem to have made their mind up before they even thought about it. Exactly.
They came up with reasons why,
Well, same with me.
Same with all of us, I suppose. So tell us about Thomas Nagel. Where's he coming from? What's his idea?
Well, Thomas Nagel, I find him a very inspiring person. So he was born in 1937 in Hungary. But
Hungarian?
Then, he's Hungarian. Well, from birth. Well, but then he, on a very early age, he moved to America. So he lived all his life in America, and then he became a very famous philosopher. And so he became famous in the 60s or 70s, very early on, with this article. It's called "What's It Like to Be a Bat?"
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So that was a groundbreaking article in which he argues that you can't possibly reduce consciousness to brain matter. You can. There's always a first-person point of view in consciousness. It's like to be something. It's like to taste an apple. It's like to have a thought. It's like to walk around, and it's even like it's like to be a bat. What's it like to be a bat? So a bat has certain experiences, and we can however much you know about a bat, you can know everything about bats, how they live, how their brains work, and how their digestion works, and everything you know about. But you can never experience the bat-like existence.
Why did you choose a bat and not a mouse or a...
Well, I think a bat is strange enough. It's really strange because it doesn't have ears and eyes as we have, but it does have some sort of sense because it has this echolocation, and it's very strange, but not too strange.
Strange enough to be unimaginable, isn't it? How can
exactly.
imagine negotiating yourself around the physical world without eyes and ears?
Yeah, exactly. And yet you perceive things in a very strange kind of way. So we can imagine. I can imagine how it would be for me as I am now. If I would go into the body of a bat, I could imagine that, but that's not the same thing as experiencing a bat-like existence. Well, the same goes for I can't experience you. I can't experience anything from the inside. So there's a big gap between experiencing, and that's from the inside, and knowing something from the outside, or the subjective point of view and the objective point of view.
So I know that you're Silavadin. I know you're living in the Netherlands. I know you're a philosopher and a Buddhist. I know all that about you, but I can't get inside you to know what it's like to be you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what has all that got to do with evolution?
Well, it's about the heart problem, because this same thing, it was later called the heart problem, and he comes back on this problem in this book. Is actually one of his main arguments. So the Darwinian point of view, it's based on what's called psychophysical reductionism. So everything psychological, like the mind, consciousness, and also other things, and they get reduced to the body, to physical things. And his main point is that you can't reduce it. You can't reduce mind to physical matter without losing the essential of mind, namely the first-person experience. So you lose, in this reduction process, you lose the first-person experience, the look from inside, so to speak.
That seems such an obvious point that it's hard for me to understand why anyone would dispute that and call that into question.
Well, because people tend to think, if I know everything about the brain, and then consciousness sort of rises up, it's like again, something random. It doesn't mean anything. It's just all these cells wandering around, and they build up a certain body. And then you have this experience, and it gets explained away, so to speak. Yeah.
I'm still trying to understand what it might be like to be a materialist, not a bat, but a materialist, a hard materialist, because presumably they do experience meaning in their lives. I can't imagine that they don't experience meaning and purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the materialist view itself is a meaning. It's a way of meaning, creating meaning. But it gets... well, I think if I imagine how it is to be a materialist, I think it's very... it's freeing in a way. But you don't have to hold on to everything. You can just live by the day. You don't have to believe in anything, which is also sort of liberating. All these beliefs you can just throw away. I think there's a liberation in it. That's what's attractive. Yeah.
But rather different from the liberation that we understand as Buddhists, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think materialism is, from a Buddhist point of view, you could call it a form of nihilism. Yeah. So there was this other guy, David Chalmer. He also went into this consciousness problem, and he imagined, he asked the question, why aren't we a race of zombies? So, because from the evolutionary point of view, we would function just as well if we would just be like we are, exactly the same, but without experience, then we would be, philosophically speaking, like a zombie, or a very sophisticated robot that can do everything that we do, and it would survive. It would survive just as well. So that's a sort of
first-person experience.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a sort of refutation of the materialist point of view, because we do have experience, but it doesn't have any explanatory force in the evolution theory.
Okay, so let's go back to Darwin and his understanding of evolution. There's so much truth in that, isn't there?
Yes, sure.
So much.
Yeah.
Is the problem with it that it's all very true, except he misses something really important out, or...
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, that's what Thomas Nagel also thinks. The basic thoughts, they're very well. They're very used, very fruitful. That is because before it was like a miracle. It was just created somehow. So how this all comes about, it's very wonderful, really, and. It's a very good theory. But according to Thomas Nagel, this is not just his only point, but his main point. He has more reasons, more things that you can't reduce. But let's keep it with the mind. And then he says, so there are gaps in this theory, which in itself is a good theory. So let's try to mend the gaps. Well, and then he comes up with several possible solutions. And one of them is panpsychism.
Now wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's a solution to something, to a gap. What's the gap that solves?
Well, the gap between the third-person experience and first-person experience, because the gap between mind and matter, so to speak. Because if you have matter, we think of matter as something dead, something without mind, something without life, something that's just physical, dead matter. But that's relatively new. We only started to think of matter like that in the 16th century. Before that, matter, it comes from the word mater, which means mother. So matter was thought of as something alive, something vibrant, something even with mind qualities.
So what happened in the 6th century to change people's minds?
Well, materialism happened, Galileo happened. So there's another book, Galileo's Error. It's about panpsychism, actually. It's a very good discussion of panpsychism.
I didn't see the author. Who's the author of that book?
Philip Goff.
Oh, okay, good. So now you've mentioned panpsychism. Can you explain to me what that is?
Well, panpsychism is the thought, the theory that everything material has a sort of proto-mind particles in it. So mind goes all the way down to the basic particles of the universe. So as it is now, it's like as the materialist view is the matter builds our body, so to speak, and then like a sort of random thing, the mind suddenly comes up. So there's a split between mind and matter. And panpsychism is the thought that even in the basic particles of the universe, the atoms and the neutrons and whatever, they already have a mind quality in themselves, or a proto-mind quality. The potentiality of mind. So mind is goes all the way down.
That's hard for me to understand, I must say, when I look at what I think of as dead things, stones, biros, this cup, for instance. To try and figure out how that has some kind of mind in it I don't think I can do it, actually.
Well, it's not mind as we have mind, but it's more like a plant. It's not so difficult to imagine. A plant is growing towards the sun. So that's
and it moves, doesn't it? When the sun moves, it moves with the sun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But a plant is alive, and a cup isn't.
No, but cups is a form of matter, and matter. Because if matter becomes in certain constellations, it becomes a plant. Plant is also matter. So this when certain particles of matter they can come into chemical reactions with each other, and these chemical reactions, you could say, that's already sort of mind quality in them.
Wow. So
it's not mind, but it's proto-mind. It's the possibility of mind. Yeah.
Proto means possible, does it? It's possibility of mind.
Yeah, before mind. It's like, Oh, there's the clock. Yeah.
Yes, just to let our hearers know that we did this interview beforehand, but halfway through the the church bells were ringing and ringing. We had to completely ruin the sound. So this is the second time we've done this interview, but they're only going to ring once or twice. Now, I've been challenging you a bit about this, partly because I'm finding it hard to come to grips with it, but also you and I both saw an interview recently with Rupert Sheldrake, and he was talking about panpsychism there. Yeah. And I think his interviewer was trying to understand what he meant. And his interviewer said the word consciousness. And Sheldrake said, oh, but of course, mind isn't necessarily conscious. Because there's lots of things that our mind does that we're not conscious of. So that helps a little bit, I think, for me to understand what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, a lot of what our mind does, we don't know about. Well, most of it, actually, yeah.
Yes.
So you can very well imagine that fungi, for example, that they live in the earth and they... that there's some sort of mind in it. Yeah.
I don't know if you know about the research about trees.
I heard about that, yeah.
Yes, there's this fascinating book by a German forester who read all the science. He looks after woods or forests. They kind of look after each other. The trees look after each other. When one of the trees is ill, the other trees, through their roots, they give it sustenance.
Yeah.
So in a way, the forest is alive, but it also has a mind, or many minds maybe.
Yeah, exactly, or a sort of mind. It's very difficult to not project our own sort of mind into the woods.
What's it like to be a forest?
Yeah, so they're all friends with each other and they're taking care. And this sort of language is very... very seductive almost, but there's something in it. Also that the earth is like an organism rather than a mechanism. So we've learned to see things as mechanical. And if you go into panpsychism, it allows you to see the world more as an organism rather than as a mechanism. Well, and that's also why I think it's important now with climate change and all this. So we need to change. We need to go through a whole paradigm change. It's not just a matter of science, but also of pure survival.
You and I could have a long discussion about climate change, but we won't. So now, I do want to go back to something you said earlier about random. Daniel Dennett says everything is random, writ large in a way. So that leaves no room for... well, I said it leaves no room for meaning, but you said, well, even that has some kind of meaning, but it doesn't seem to... We're not going anywhere. The species aren't going anywhere in particular. We're not after something. We're not getting any better in a way. We're just getting better at survival.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
where do you stand with that?
Well, that's another point of Thomas Nagel. So his first point is panpsychism. Let's look at panpsychism, and his other point is let's look at the thought that there's a direction in the universe, in evolution. So let's assume, let's go from the hypothesis. It's not a claim, but it's a hypothesis that we're moving towards awakening. Well, he doesn't use the word awakening, but it's something like awakening, some like more consciousness. So let's assume that there's an inherent tendency in the universe. It's not something like God, but it's like a natural laws. They move towards this gradual more awakening. So together with panpsychism, these two thoughts, they can lead to a whole different paradigm in evolution theory.
So, of course, you're making me think of our teacher, Sangharakshita, talks about the lower evolution and the higher evolution. The lower evolution has taken us to where we are. And then after that, it's a matter of choice whether you want to evolve further. to Buddhahood. So you and I are very familiar with that. But can you say a little bit more about Thomas Nagel, where he thinks we might be going? You said more mind, but I don't really know what that means.
Yeah, there's a quote. I didn't think of getting this quote, but I can't find it so quickly. But there's a certain sentence in this book that he says, "Oh, well, let's go from the hypothesis. Let's hypothesize that the universe is moving towards I don't know the exact word to use, but more mind-like quality, more awakening quality." Yeah. So there's an inherent purpose. It's basically Aristotle. Aristotle also had this view that we're moving towards something. It's like a natural law.
So I guess you're talking about teleology.
Yeah, I'm talking about the natural teleology. Yeah. Yeah.
So things are changing, but they're not just changing randomly or just in order to survive, but we're changing towards something.
Yeah. Well, Thomas Nagel said there's a natural bias towards more awakening. So if all conditions are equal, then there's a sort of natural bias towards a certain direction.
And is that simply a theory, or has he been looking at the evolution of species to back that up?
Yeah, well, he's a very good philosopher because he's very careful. He doesn't claim anything, but he just says the theory as it is now is not a good theory. It has certain gaps that are just that you can't solve within this paradigm. So let's look at another paradigm. And then, well, he also sees many problems. There are many theoretical problems, things that are not solved. But he says, well, let's look at it at least. Let's change our paradigm. Because what we did so far didn't work. So let's try something else. And if you have a new paradigm, then you will start asking different questions, and you will get different answers.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah. I remember reading a book review by the British philosopher Mary Midgley. Do you know her?
No, I don't know. No.
She was a friend of Iris Murdoch. They were great friends.
Okay. Yeah.
And Mary Midgley had been reviewing The Science Delusion by Rupert Sheldrake. And she said something along, not exactly like this, but something like this, that scientific theories you shouldn't take them as facts, but more like creative ideas which you can work with for a while, but then they don't work after a while. Yeah,
exactly. So depending on what questions you ask, you will get different answers. So if the whole scientific community were to start investigating panpsychism, then they would get answers in that direction. And if they assume that it's nonsense, then they won't find anything, because they won't be looking in a proper way.
Is it again, referring back to Rupert Sheldrake? I think he is of the opinion that most scientists are materialists, or that science itself tends towards materialism. Would you say that's true?
Well, not in general, but in this culture, in our times, so to speak. But in science, in other times, we're completely different.
Okay. But now
I don't think science in general is inherently materialistic. It's rationalistic, but not materialist. Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is that if it's true that most scientists these days tend towards the materialist viewpoint, or as Sheldrake says, many of them don't, but they don't say so.
Exactly. I think that's very true. Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, I think that's very true. There's this general sense that you need to be materialistic, because otherwise you won't be accepted in the academic community. I think what he said, I agree with it.
So certain ideas just aren't going, certain questions won't be asked because they have to hold on to a certain worldview.
Yeah, exactly. Because you won't get funded, or your promoter won't accept it, or and these sort of things.
Yes. So thank you very much, Silavadin. That was really fascinating. Quite a lot to think about there. And I would like to interview you again about other topics in future.
Yeah, sure. I would be happy to. Yeah.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.